The afternoon sun was shining brightly across the city, making the glass windows of tall buildings sparkle. The streets were filled with people walking quickly, holding shopping bags, and rushing from one place to another. Among them was a woman who moved with quiet confidence, though no one gave her a second glance. She was dressed in a simple blouse and dark jeans, with her hair tied neatly back. She did not wear heavy makeup, and apart from the watch on her wrist, there was nothing that hinted at her wealth or success. To most people, she looked like any ordinary shopper who had just stepped out after finishing her day's work. But in truth, she was the CEO of one of the country's fastest-growing luxury jewelry brands. Her name was Angela, and her story was not like most. She had built her company from scratch, beginning years ago with nothing but a dream and a small loan she had taken from a friend. Through long hours, endless sacrifices, and countless struggles, she had turned that dream into a shining reality. Today, her jewelry stores stood in the best malls and shopping streets, their bright lights attracting rich clients, tourists, and collectors. Yet, despite all this success, Angela remained humble. She never let her wealth define her, and she often enjoyed blending into the crowd just to see how people treated her when they did not know who she was. That afternoon, Angela had finished a long meeting with investors. She was tired, but instead of heading straight home, she decided to visit one of her own stores located in the heart of the city. It was not unusual for her to drop by unannounced. She believed that the only way to truly understand her business was to experience it the way her customers did. Sometimes she dressed elegantly and came as the known owner. Other times, like today, she dressed simply, almost casually, just to see whether her staff showed the same respect to every person who walked through those doors. When she arrived, the jewelry store looked stunning from the outside. Its glass doors reflected the busy street, and inside, the counters glittered with diamonds, gold, and silver. Elegant necklaces hung on velvet stands, and rings sparkled under soft lighting. Customers were moving around slowly, admiring the displays. A few staff members were busy assisting them, smiling politely, explaining details about the designs. Angela opened the door and stepped in quietly. The bell above the door chimed, announcing her arrival, but no one came forward immediately to greet her. That was not unusual. Staff could be busy, but she noticed a few of them glanced at her quickly, then looked away. She smiled anyway and walked slowly toward the nearest counter, admiring the new collection she had approved just 2 months ago. As she leaned closer to look at a diamond bracelet, she felt eyes on her. When she turned slightly, she noticed the store manager standing near the side, his arms crossed. He was watching her, but not with the warm, welcoming smile a customer might expect. Instead, his face carried suspicion, almost as if he was questioning why she had come into the store at all. Angela ignored the look and continued observing the pieces. A young couple stood a few steps away, excitedly trying on engagement rings, while another woman in a designer dress was being shown a necklace worth thousands of dollars. Staff were quick to attend to them, offering trays and explanations with soft, practiced voices. But Angela, standing quietly in her simple blouse and jeans, was left alone. She waited patiently for a moment, hoping someone would approach. After all, her philosophy had always been clear: every person who entered deserved respect, no matter how they looked. She wanted to see if her team followed that value without her presence being announced. Finally, after a few minutes, Angela lifted her head and asked softly if she could see a necklace displayed inside the glass case in front of her. Her voice was polite, gentle, and curious. She had designed that very necklace herself, sketching it late at night on a piece of paper, inspired by her grandmother's old jewelry. She wanted to hold it in her hand again and see if the quality matched her vision. But before any staff member could respond, the store manager walked over. His footsteps were sharp against the polished floor, and his expression was stiff. He looked Angela up and down quickly, his eyes moving from her simple watch to her jeans, and then he gave a thin smile that did not reach his eyes. "Those pieces are quite expensive," he said in a firm voice. They're not for casual browsing. Angela was taken aback for a moment. She had not expected such a response. Still, she kept her calm and replied politely, I understand. I would just like to see it up close, if that's possible. The manager's lips pressed into a line. He shook his head slowly and muttered, It's better if you look at something more affordable. Those are worth more than some people make in a year. The words hung in the air like heavy stones. Angela felt the sting, not because she could not afford it after all, she owned the store, but because of the way he dismissed her without a second thought. Around them, a few customers had begun to notice the exchange. One or two glanced at Angela with curiosity, as if wondering why the manager was being so cold. Angela did not argue. She simply gave a small nod and turned back to the glass case. Inside, the necklace sparkled under the lights, shining with the brilliance of diamonds carefully set in white gold. It was one of her proudest designs, yet in that moment, she was being treated as though she had no right even to touch it. She stepped aside slightly, giving space for another customer to look. In her heart, she felt a mixture of sadness and disappointment. This was not how her business was supposed to run. She had built her brand on the promise that every customer, regardless of wealth or appearance, deserved the same warmth and respect. But here, in her own store, her own manager had just broken that promise. Angela stood quietly for another moment, observing the scene. The young couple nearby was laughing happily as the staff placed rings on their fingers. The elegant woman in the designer dress was being praised for her choice of necklace. And Angela, the very woman who made all of this possible, was being told to look at something cheaper. The irony of the situation was almost unbelievable. She could have walked away, revealing nothing, but a small smile touched her lips instead. She knew that sometimes life tested patience before revealing the truth. And she was willing to wait, to see just how far this manager would go in his assumptions. The store continued buzzing around her, yet Angela felt a quiet storm building inside. She did not need to raise her voice. She did not need to demand attention. She knew that within a short time, the reality of who she was would become clear to everyone in the room. And so, she stood there, calm and dignified, while the seconds ticked by seconds that would soon change everything for the man who had just denied her service in her own jewelry store. The store grew busier as the minutes passed. More customers came in, and the soft hum of conversation filled the air, blending with the gentle background music that played from hidden speakers. Angela continued to walk slowly around the displays, taking in the details of the jewelry she herself had approved for production. She could see the fine cuts of the diamonds, the polished surfaces of the gold bangles, and the delicate craftsmanship in every piece. But while her eyes admired the jewelry, her mind kept replaying the manager's words. She was used to facing challenges. Being a black woman in the world of luxury business had never been easy. Many times in her journey, people had doubted her abilities simply because of her appearance. But she had never allowed such judgments to stop her. Instead, she had let them fuel her determination, pushing her to prove everyone wrong. Today, however, the sting was sharper because it came from inside her own company. She had worked so hard to build a culture of respect and fairness, and yet here stood a manager who thought he could decide who was worthy of handling the jewelry. Angela stood in front of another glass counter. This one displayed elegant bracelets lined with small diamonds. She tapped lightly on the glass and asked a nearby sales assistant if she could try one on. The young woman hesitated for a moment, glanced quickly at the manager, and then gave an awkward smile. Before she could respond, the manager stepped in again. His voice was low but firm, carrying a tone that was more dismissive than polite. "I told you already," he said. "These items are not for casual trying. They're very valuable, and we can't let just anyone handle them." Angela looked at him calmly, her face unreadable. Around them, a few customers began to notice the growing tension. The young couple who had been trying on rings earlier glanced toward her. The elegant woman in the designer dress raised her eyebrows slightly, whispering something to the staff member assisting her. It was clear that the manager's words were loud enough for others to hear. Angela drew in a soft breath, still keeping her composure. "I understand," she said quietly. "But I would still like to see the bracelet." The manager shook his head again, this time with less patience. "Ma'am, I think you should look at the pieces on the far side," he said, gesturing toward a section of the store where simpler silver jewelry was displayed. "Those are more suited for, well, let's just say, more suited for certain budgets." The way he said it, with a slight pause and a half-smile, carried more insult than the words themselves. It was as if he had decided, without knowing anything about her, that she could not possibly afford what the store had to offer. Angela's heart tightened, not from anger but from disappointment. She thought of the lessons she had always tried to instill in her employees: never judge a customer by appearance, never assume someone cannot afford something, and always treat people with kindness. Clearly, this manager had not understood those values. Nearby, one of the younger sales associates shifted uncomfortably. She seemed nervous, her eyes darting between the manager and Angela. She wanted to help but looked too afraid to step out of line. The power of the manager's authority was keeping everyone quiet. Angela gave the young woman a small, encouraging smile, but then she turned back to the manager. Her voice was soft but steady. "It seems you've already decided who I am," she said gently. The manager gave a quick laugh, though it carried no warmth. "I've worked in this industry long enough to know when someone is wasting time. We get many people who come in just to look, but they're not serious buyers. It's my job to protect these pieces from careless hands." Angela let the words sink in. She noticed the irony: the man was telling the very owner of the business that she was a time waster in her own store. But she remained silent, her calmness almost unsettling. Other shoppers began to whisper among themselves. A middle-aged man standing near the watches section frowned, clearly uncomfortable with what he was hearing. A young woman, holding her shopping bag, looked at Angela sympathetically. The atmosphere was shifting. The dismissive tone of the manager was no longer just between him and Angela, it had become a performance in front of everyone present. Angela reached for her small handbag, opening it as if to look for something, but then she stopped. She decided it was not yet the right time to reveal who she was. Instead, she simply gave a nod and moved to another section of the store. The manager followed her with his eyes, his suspicion not fading. He whispered something to one of the staff members, who quickly straightened up and began watching Angela from a distance. It was almost as if they had been instructed to keep an eye on her, as though she might cause trouble. Angela's steps were unhurried. She stopped at the earrings section, where beautiful diamond studs and long drop earrings sparkled under the bright lights. She thought of her customers: the young brides-to-be, the anniversary couples, the mothers buying gifts for their daughters. Each piece carried a story, a memory waiting to be made. And here she was, the creator of all this beauty, being told that she was not good enough to even hold it. A few more minutes passed. Angela noticed how differently others were treated compared to her. A man in a tailored suit entered, and immediately two staff members rushed to welcome him. They shook his hand, offered him a seat, and brought out trays of watches. Another woman came in carrying a designer handbag, and the staff greeted her with warm smiles, offering champagne. The contrast was clear, and the lesson even clearer: the manager valued appearance more than character. Angela did not speak further, but inside she felt a quiet storm rising. She was not someone who believed in anger or loud confrontations. She believed in fairness and dignity. But she also believed in accountability, and she knew that a manager who treated people like this had no place in her company. The manager, meanwhile, seemed unaware of the trouble he was walking into. He continued to stand with his arms crossed, occasionally glancing at Angela as though she were an intruder instead of a customer. His arrogance was written all over his face. The customers, however, were no longer fooled. Some were beginning to realize that something unusual was happening. A few of them were silently rooting for Angela, even though they didn't know who she was. They could sense that she carried herself with quiet strength, and they were curious to see what would happen next. Angela adjusted her watch and looked around the store once more. She decided she had seen enough. The test was complete. She had observed the way the manager treated her, and it had revealed everything she needed to know about his attitude and his failure to represent the brand properly. Still, she chose not to reveal herself just yet. She wanted to give one last chance, one final opportunity, to see if the manager would realize his mistake. She turned toward him again and said softly, "Could you please show me just one piece? I won't take much of your time." The manager sighed dramatically, as if the request itself was a burden. His voice grew colder. "Ma'am, I've already explained. Please look at the more affordable section. If you're not going to buy, don't waste my staff's time." Those words echoed loudly in the store. This time, almost every customer nearby heard them. A heavy silence followed. Some shook their heads, others whispered in disbelief. Angela's eyes stayed calm, but inside she knew the moment had come. The manager had crossed the line completely, and soon he would learn exactly who he had been speaking to. The silence that followed the manager's last words was heavy, almost uncomfortable. Every customer and staff member in the store felt it. Angela stood there, her calm expression unchanged, though inside she knew this was the breaking point. She had given the manager every chance to show respect, every opportunity to correct himself, but he had chosen arrogance again and again. What he did not realize was that the woman he kept dismissing was not just a customer but the very person who signed his paychecks. Angela shifted her weight slightly, her quiet presence commanding attention even without a word. She glanced around the store, noticing how different people were reacting. Some customers looked shocked, whispering behind their hands. Others looked at her with sympathy, clearly disapproving of the manager's attitude. A few staff members stood frozen, their nervous eyes darting between the manager and Angela. They seemed to know something was wrong but did not dare to intervene. The young saleswoman Angela had smiled at earlier looked the most uncomfortable. Her hands fidgeted with the cloth she used to polish the glass counters. She wanted to step forward, to help, but she seemed afraid of the manager's authority. Angela gave her another small, reassuring smile, as if to silently say, "It's all right." That little gesture gave the young woman courage. Then, it happened. The young saleswoman, with her voice shaking slightly, whispered to another employee standing beside her, "That's her, isn't it?" The other staff member's eyes widened, and she nodded quickly. She knew exactly who Angela was. The whisper spread like wildfire. Within seconds, 3 more employees knew the truth, and their expressions changed instantly from discomfort to shock. The staff began looking at each other nervously, unsure of what to do. The young woman who had spoken up pressed her lips together, finally gathering the courage to walk forward. She took a deep breath and said softly, "Ma'am, would you like to see that bracelet now?" Her tone was polite, respectful, and almost apologetic. Angela gave her a kind smile. "Yes, please," she said. The manager, however, was quick to interfere. He stepped between them, his face flushed with irritation. "Didn't I make myself clear? She is not here to buy. Don't waste your time." The young staff member froze again, but now the tension in the store was too obvious to ignore. A man standing with his wife in the ring section frowned deeply and muttered loud enough for others to hear, "That's not right. You don't treat people like that." His wife nodded in agreement, glaring at the manager. Angela decided the moment had come. She reached into her handbag, pulling out a small black card that had her name embossed in silver letters. It was her access card, one that only the CEO carried. With calm precision, she placed it on the counter. The store fell silent. The young saleswoman's eyes widened, and she covered her mouth with her hand. The other employees stared at the card, realizing that everything they had just witnessed was about to take a dramatic turn. Angela looked directly at the manager, her voice calm and steady. "I think you should take a closer look at that card," she said. The manager blinked, confused at first. He picked up the card and read the name. His eyes scanned it once, then again, as though his brain refused to accept what he was seeing. His face drained of color. You're Angela Morris," he stammered, his voice trembling for the first time. Angela gave a polite nod. "Yes. I am the founder and CEO of this company. This store, and every piece of jewelry inside it, belongs to my brand." The words spread like electricity through the room. Customers gasped. The young couple near the ring counter looked stunned, the elegant woman with the designer handbag covered her mouth, and even the man in the tailored suit paused mid-conversation to stare at Angela with wide eyes. The manager staggered slightly, his mouth opening and closing as he tried to find words. I didn't know. I didn't realize," he stuttered, his arrogance melting into panic. Angela raised her hand gently, cutting him off. "You didn't need to know who I was," she said softly. "It should not matter. Every customer who walks through these doors deserves respect. That was the first lesson I gave when I opened this company. But today, you failed that lesson." The staff members all lowered their heads, ashamed. They knew she was right. The young saleswoman bit her lip, her eyes shining with relief that the truth had finally come out. The manager's hands shook as he tried to hand the card back. "Ma'am, please. I can explain." "I thought," Angela's gaze was firm but not cruel. "No, you thought wrong. You assumed. You judged me by what I wore, not by who I was. That is not the culture of this company. That is not the way we treat people here." The customers listened in silence, hanging on every word. They were witnessing a moment of truth, a rare instance when power and dignity came together in the most unexpected way. The manager tried to speak again, but his words faltered. I was only trying to protect the jewelry." Angela shook her head slowly. "You were not protecting the jewelry. You were protecting your pride. And in doing so, you disrespected not only me but the values this company stands for." A heavy silence followed. The manager looked down, unable to meet her eyes. For the first time, his confident posture collapsed. He looked smaller, weaker, exposed in front of his staff and customers. Angela turned her attention to the young saleswoman. "Thank you for offering to help me," she said warmly. "That is the spirit I want in this store. Never be afraid to show kindness." The young woman's cheeks flushed, and she nodded quickly, clearly grateful for Angela's acknowledgement. The tension in the room was broken only by the soft hum of the background music, still playing faintly. Customers exchanged glances, many of them nodding in approval. They could feel that something important was happening, something that would be remembered long after they left the store. Angela placed the card back into her handbag and stood tall. Her presence filled the room, not through loudness or anger but through calm authority. Everyone could see it now, the quiet strength of a leader who had built an empire not on arrogance but on respect. The manager swallowed hard, knowing what was about to come. His job, his pride, his authority, all of it hung in the balance. Angela looked at him one last time. "This is not about me," she said quietly. "This is about how you see people. And that is something no business can afford to ignore." The message was clear. The turning point had come. And the next moment would decide everything. The jewelry store felt like it was holding its breath. The customers, the staff, even the soft background music seemed quieter now, as if the whole room was waiting for what Angela would say next. The manager stood frozen, his usual arrogance gone, replaced by a pale nervousness that clung to him like a shadow. He had misjudged her, dismissed her, even insulted her, and now he stood face to face with the truth. The woman he had treated with disdain was the CEO and founder of the very company he worked for. Angela's calm voice carried through the silence. It was not sharp, not loud, but filled with a steady authority that made every person in the store listen carefully. "I built this company on respect," she said softly, her eyes focused on the manager. "Not just respect for the jewelry, but respect for the people who walk into these doors. Without customers, these pieces mean nothing. Without kindness, our brand means nothing. And today, you failed both." The manager shifted on his feet. His hands twitched at his sides, and sweat dotted his forehead. He tried to speak, but the words stuck in his throat. The confidence he once carried had disappeared, leaving only shame and fear behind. I didn't mean to," he began. Angela raised her hand gently, stopping him. "It doesn't matter what you meant," she said with quiet firmness. "What matters is how you acted. You dismissed me because of how I looked. You assumed I could not afford what this store offers. And worse, you made those judgments out loud, in front of everyone here." Several customers nodded, murmuring in agreement. The man standing with his wife whispered, "She's right," while the elegant woman in the designer dress pressed her lips together tightly, looking embarrassed for ever being impressed by the manager earlier. The young couple near the ring section smiled faintly, their eyes filled with admiration for Angela's composure. Angela turned slightly, addressing not just the manager but the entire room. "Let me ask you all something," she said. "Would you feel valued as a customer if you were treated the way I was? Would you feel welcome in a store where you are judged by your clothes, not by your heart?" The customers shook their heads. One woman spoke softly, "No. Respect is more important than anything else." Angela nodded. "Exactly," she said. "Luxury is not just about diamonds and gold. True luxury is when every person feels valued, no matter what they look like." Her words carried a weight that settled over the room. Everyone could feel it, the truth, the sincerity, the lesson that was bigger than jewelry or business. Then she turned back to the manager. Her voice remained calm, but there was no mistaking the finality in her tone. "I cannot allow someone who behaves this way to represent my company. Your actions today have proven that you are not fit to hold this position. Effective immediately, you are dismissed from your role as manager." Gasps filled the room. Customers looked at each other, stunned by the swiftness of her decision, but none could deny it was fair. The staff members shifted nervously, but many of them secretly felt relieved. They had seen the manager's arrogance before, and now, for the first time, justice was unfolding right before their eyes. The manager's mouth opened in disbelief. His face flushed red, then pale again. You can't fire me like this, in front of everyone." Angela's gaze stayed steady. "I can," she said, her voice calm but unshakable. "And I am. This company does not tolerate disrespect, not to me and not to any customer. You've shown me, and everyone here, who you truly are. That is enough." The room was utterly silent again, except for the sound of the manager's uneven breathing. He looked around, perhaps hoping someone would defend him, but all he saw were faces of disappointment. Even the customers who had been strangers minutes ago were united in agreement his behavior was unacceptable. The young saleswoman who had bravely offered to help Angela earlier lowered her eyes, but a faint smile touched her lips. For the first time, she felt that the values Angela spoke about were not just words on a piece of paper, they were real, lived out in front of her. Angela continued speaking, her words now directed toward the staff. "Let this be a lesson," she said gently. "Our work is not only about selling jewelry. It is about giving people memories. The engagement rings we sell become symbols of love. The necklaces become heirlooms. The bracelets become gifts that mothers pass down to daughters. Every piece in this store carries a story. And every person who buys it deserves to feel respected while they choose it. That is our duty." The employees nodded, their expressions serious. They knew she was right. They also knew that her presence in the store that day had not been an accident, it had been a test, one that revealed the truth about how the store was being run. Angela looked around the store once more. The displays glittered, the lights sparkled, but the most important thing shining in that moment was the message she had given: dignity matters more than appearance. The manager finally lowered his head, realizing there was nothing left to say. His arrogance, his pride, his authority, all of it had been stripped away. He quietly stepped aside, his footsteps heavy, knowing his time in the company was over. Angela turned back to the customers and gave them a warm smile. "I apologize to all of you for what you witnessed today," she said sincerely. "This is not what my company stands for. I want you to know that every person who walks through these doors deserves to be treated with kindness, fairness, and respect. If you did not feel that today, I am truly sorry. But I promise you, it will not happen again." The customers responded with soft applause, some nodding in admiration, others smiling at her grace. The man with his wife said, that was the right thing to do, while the young couple whispered to each other about how inspiring it was to see such leadership. Even the elegant woman in the designer dress gave a small clap, humbled by what she had just witnessed. Angela thanked them with a slight bow of her head, then turned once more to her staff. "Remember," she said softly, "kindness costs nothing, but it can mean everything. This is the standard we must uphold." Her words lingered in the air long after she finished speaking. The staff stood taller, the customers felt reassured, and the store seemed brighter, not just from the lights but from the atmosphere of renewed respect. Angela picked up her handbag, ready to leave. She did not need to buy anything that day. The lesson had been more valuable than any piece of jewelry. She walked gracefully toward the door, her footsteps quiet yet powerful. The staff bowed their heads as she passed, and the customers watched with admiration. Just before stepping out, Angela turned back one last time, her eyes soft but strong. "Every customer matters," she said. "Never forget that." And with that, she left the store, leaving behind a room filled with silence, reflection, and the unforgettable memory of a leader who had shown the true meaning of respect and responsibility. The door closed gently behind Angela as she stepped out of the jewelry store. The warm afternoon air greeted her, but her mind was still inside with the people she had just left. For a moment, she stood still on the sidewalk, looking at the busy street, the cars passing, and the chatter of strangers who had no idea what had just happened inside that store. To anyone walking by, she was simply another woman leaving a shop, but those who had been inside would never forget what they had witnessed. Inside the store, the silence continued even after Angela left. The staff looked at one another, still stunned by the turn of events. Some felt relief, others felt ashamed, and most were deeply moved. The young saleswoman who had dared to step forward earlier leaned against the counter, her heart still racing. She had always believed in treating people with kindness, but until that day, she had been too afraid to challenge the manager's authority. Angela's words had given her courage, and now she felt proud that she had at least tried to help. The customers began to leave one by one, but not before sharing their thoughts quietly with each other. The man who had been shopping for watches turned to his wife and said, "That woman is remarkable." She didn't raise her voice once, but everyone listened. His wife nodded, adding softly, "True power doesn't need to shout. It's felt in the way someone carries themselves." The young couple who had been looking at engagement rings held hands as they stepped outside. The man whispered to his partner, "That's the kind of leader I want to support. When we buy our rings, I want it to be from this company." The woman smiled, agreeing wholeheartedly. For them, the experience had turned into more than just shopping. It had become a lesson about integrity. Back outside, Angela walked slowly to her car. She was not angry. In fact, she felt calm, almost at peace. She had not embarrassed the manager for the sake of ego, nor had she revealed her identity to prove her wealth. She had done it because the truth needed to be shown not just to him, but to everyone watching. She believed that sometimes lessons are not taught in boardrooms or training sessions. Sometimes, the most powerful lessons are taught in the very moments when people least expect them. As she sat in her car, she thought back to her grandmother, who had been one of her greatest inspirations. Her grandmother used to tell her, "Respect is the jewelry of the soul. Wear it always, because it shines brighter than diamonds." Those words had stayed with Angela all her life, and they guided her even now. She had built her company on that principle, and she would continue to protect it no matter the cost. Meanwhile, the story inside the store was already starting to spread. One customer, a middle-aged woman, pulled out her phone and began typing a post on social media about what she had just witnessed. Another young man who had been standing near the watch section quietly recorded part of Angela's calm speech and shared it with his friends. Within hours, people across the city began talking about it. Black CEO denied service in her own store became a headline that caught attention not because of the scandal, but because of the way she had handled it with dignity, grace, and quiet strength. In the days that followed, Angela's company received hundreds of messages from customers. Some wrote to apologize for what she had gone through, even though they had nothing to do with it. Others wrote to praise her leadership, saying that her values had made them loyal to the brand forever. Many shared their own stories of being judged unfairly, saying her actions gave them hope that change was possible. Angela read many of those messages late at night in her office. Each story touched her heart. She realized that her small act inside that store had become bigger than she imagined. It wasn't just about one rude manager. It was about something much deeper, the way people are often judged unfairly in society, and the need for kindness no matter what. Her staff, too, learned a powerful lesson. In training sessions that followed, the incident was openly discussed. Angela herself attended one of those sessions, sitting with the employees not as their boss but as a teacher and a listener. She told them gently, "I don't expect perfection. I expect growth. Mistakes will happen, but what matters is how we respond, how we learn, and how we treat others afterward. Respect must be our foundation." The young saleswoman who had spoken up that day was later promoted. Angela wanted her to know that courage and kindness would always be rewarded in her company. The staff who had stayed silent learned too. They understood that silence in the face of unfairness can sometimes be just as harmful as the unfairness itself. They promised themselves that they would never again stand by if someone was treated wrongly. The manager, on the other hand, left quietly. Though his pride had been wounded, he could not deny that Angela had been fair. She had not shouted, she had not humiliated him with insults, but she had shown him the truth clearly. Perhaps, in his own way, he learned something that day too, a lesson he might carry into his future, wherever it would take him. Months later, the story was still remembered. Customers often spoke of it when they entered the store. Some said they felt more welcome than ever before, knowing that the CEO herself cared so deeply about respect. Others came simply because they admired Angela's values and wanted to support her business. Sales did not suffer, in fact, they grew stronger, because people trusted the brand even more. For Angela, it was never about profit. It was about people. She continued to lead her company with the same quiet dignity she had shown that day. And whenever she visited her stores, sometimes in elegant attire, sometimes dressed simply, her staff no longer judged by appearances. They greeted every person with the same warmth, remembering that the true measure of luxury was not in diamonds or gold, but in respect. Angela's story became a reminder that leadership is not about power or titles. It is about responsibility, the responsibility to stand for what is right, even when it is uncomfortable. She had turned a painful moment into a powerful message, and in doing so, she had not only protected her brand but also inspired countless others. And so, the lesson lived on: true greatness is not in the jewelry that shines under bright lights, but in the kindness that shines in everyday actions. Angela wore that kindness like a crown, and it made her richer than all the diamonds in her store.